Welcome back. All right, I want to talk about the Pittsburgh Penguins today. The streakiest team in the league, maybe. They've got to be up there as one of the streakiest teams. Their home record's 12-5-4. Away from home, they're 10-10-2. So they're better at home than they are on the road. That's really the way things are supposed to work. But this year in the NHL, everything's topsy-turvy. So we could talk about their away record. Their 581 points percentage. That's 14th in the National Hockey League. So they're right around the middle of the pack. They have 19 regulation wins. This is one thing to keep an eye on because regulation wins are the tiebreaker if teams end up tied in points at the end of the year. The Islanders have 20. So right now, as we speak, they do not have a tiebreaker on the Islanders in that regard. Their goals scored per game, 3.21. That's 14th in the NHL. Their goals against, 3.02. That's 16th in the NHL. Their power play, 22nd overall at 20.3%. Their penalty kill, 4th overall. They're very good at penalty killing. 83.2%, and this is a team that does not take very many penalties. Their shots per game, they're getting outshot. 33.4 they're allowing. They're getting 32.4 shots per game. It's a minor difference, but it's something that's interesting for a Pittsburgh team that you would think would have a very explosive offense, would have a lot of shots, and they don't really generate as much as one might think. So they started the season winning 4 out of 5. Then they lost 7 in a row, won 2 in a row, lost 2 in a row. They won 5 in a row. Then they lost 2 in a row. They won 7 in a row. That was before they lost 7 out of 8. Then they won 2 in a row, lost 2 in a row, and last night they beat Anaheim in overtime. And that was a game that it looked like until late Anaheim might win. So this is a team that really has been feast or famine, probably the most dramatic feast or famine team, which is when I knew I had to do a video on Pittsburgh because it's an interesting setup, right? You have a team that looks great for a while and then they look miserable. Now, I've seen the comments as well about whether or not this has to do with how strong their schedule is. So against Boston, they're 0-1-1. Most of the league has had struggles against Boston. Against Toronto, they're 1-2. So that series is done. They've only played Tampa once, and they beat them. They've played Carolina 4 times. They're glad they're done with Carolina. They ended up 0-2-2 against the Carolina Hurricanes. 0-1 against New Jersey. They'll be seeing New Jersey again before the month's out. They're 1-0 against the New York Rangers. They're 1-0 against Washington. Against the Islanders, they're 0-1. So these are all teams they're going to be seeing in the second half of the season that could decide their playoff fate, right? Against Winnipeg, they're 1-1. So they're done with Winnipeg. Against Dallas, they're 1-0. Minnesota, 1-0. Vegas, 1-1. Seattle, they're done with Vegas. Or done with Seattle. They're glad they're done with Seattle. They're 0-2 against Seattle. They're 1-0 against LA. 0-1 against Edmonton. 1-1 against Calgary. Basically, for any team above the playoff line, plus the New York Islanders, because the Islanders are right tied with them, they're 10-13-3 by my count. So could they be better against teams that are in the playoffs? Yes. Is that a terrible record? I don't think it's a terrible record. And then they get their points where they should. So against teams that are below 500, below the NHL 500 mark, they're 1-0 against Philly. They're going to see plenty of Philly in the second half of the season. They haven't played Ottawa, but Ottawa's next on their list of teams to play, and they play them back-to-back. They're 0-2 against Montreal, so that's 2 overtime or shootout losses against Montreal. I think they were both in overtime. 2-0 against Columbus, so they got points against Columbus when they needed them. 1-1 against Vancouver, so they lost in Vancouver and then beat them at home. They have not played San Jose yet. That will be resolved by the end of this month. They will have played San Jose once. They've played against Arizona twice and beat them both times, so they're done with Arizona. They beat Anaheim again last night. That was their first meeting with them. Now they'll have to play them in Anaheim as well. And they've beaten Chicago the one time they played Chicago. So against teams below NHL 500, they're 8-1-2. Again, by my count. And so they do well against the teams that they should, right? They beat the teams that they should. So when you see them up against Ottawa, they should beat Ottawa. So the upcoming schedule. Tomorrow they're at Ottawa. And then on Friday, they're at home against Ottawa. Now, the Sens are very streaky as well. But in general, the Sens have been sunk by the November they had. So as long as Pittsburgh doesn't take them lightly, and they shouldn't because they're in a precarious position when it comes to the playoffs, they should be okay. Then on Sunday, they're at New Jersey. That's a big game right there for both teams, right? New Jersey's not going to want to give Pittsburgh hope that they could jump into the top 3. So New Jersey's going to want to stop them. Then on Tuesday, they're at home against Florida. The following Thursday, they're at Washington. And then before the All-Star break, they're at home against San Jose on that Saturday. So of the remaining 6 games before we hit the break, only 2 of them are against teams that are above the playoff line. So they may be ready to go on another streak here where we talk about how well they're playing going into the All-Star break. It's fascinating to watch because when you look at their scoring list, you've got Crosby at the top, 43 games, 21 goals, 28 assists, 49 points. He is no longer the number 1 scorer 5-on-5 in the National Hockey League, but the argument can be still made that he is the best player in the league. You can make that argument at 35 years of age that Crosby still has every ounce of talent and ability and effort as he did when he was 25. Malkin, age 36, 43 games, 15 goals, 26 assists, 41 points. Malkin is an excellent all-around player. He's a very good player and still looks really good out there. But is he the same Malkin that he was 10 years ago? Probably not. And for Malkin, that's okay because he's still on pace for about 30 goals and about 80 points. Those are very good totals. Jake Guentzel, 39 games played, 18 goals, 21 assists, 39 points. And Guentzel, point per game, that's solid. On pace for about 35 goals is excellent. And so, yeah, whether he gets 35, whether he gets 40, Guentzel is a goal scorer for the Penguins. Raquel has had quite the bounce back as well. 43 games played, 15 goals, 14 assists, 29 points. I think Raquel's playing the best hockey he has in years. Then you've got Jason Zucker, who's a pending UFA. 39 games, 11 goals, 17 assists, 28 points. He's 31 years of age. One thing to watch with the Pittsburgh Penguins this summer is, what do you do? So let's just say that things keep trending the way they're trending, and we'll come back to that too. But what do you do? Do you bring back Zucker? How much is he worth? Do you give him a longer-term extension? Do you give him 2, 3, 4 years? How many years do you give him? You got Brian Rust, 43 games, 10 goals, 17 assists, 27 points. His numbers are down a bit, but he had a very slow start, so he's recovered from that. Carter, his numbers have come down. He's 38 years of age. This is what happens. 40 games, 7 goals, 12 assists, 19 points. Carter, it'll be interesting to see what they do with him in the offseason as well. And again, it's all going to depend on playoffs, right? So Carter's 38, Crosby's 35, Malkin's 36, Zucker's 35. You got Letang, there's 35. This is a team where there's a lot of older players, and it's in a league that seems to keep getting younger. So does that mean that they have less foot speed than other teams? In some cases, probably. And so it'll be interesting to see in the offseason with Carter. He's not on an expiring contract, so do you find somebody to move that to? And how much does their playoff record end up impacting that? So if they go on a run in the playoffs, do they just keep everybody together? Kasperi Kapanen, very polarizing figure in Pittsburgh, the same as he was in Toronto. 34 games, 6 goals, 11 assists, 17 points. He's a very good player at times. He can be visible at other times. Kapanen overall gives you enough that you want to keep him around, but he's also frustrating enough that you go, yeah, but can we trade him? And I say that because I've seen it from Penguins fans the same as I saw it with Toronto. With Kapanen, he's a good player, but he's not really a guy you want to be counting on for your primary scoring, right? So for Letang, 29 games, 2 goals, 14 assists, 16 points. Of course, he returned to the team today at practice, and he's 35 years of age. Father just passed. Of course, they decided to keep Letang, Crosby, Malkin together in last offseason, which, I mean, there's a conversation to be had about where this team would be if they had not managed to keep all 3 players. If they had said, you know what, we're going to try to spend that cap money and figure out a way to retool on the fly, what would they look like, right? So, because it's not like you're going to have a hard time attracting players to coming to Pittsburgh because they get a chance to play with Sidney Crosby and for a team that has won some cups lately. So Pittsburgh should be a pretty attractive destination, but with what they did with bringing Malkin and Letang back and doubling down on that core means you can't really do that now. Brock McGinn, 43 games, 10 goals, 5 assists, 15 points. Some really key goals for them when they were playing well, but he's an up-and-down player. He's still on pace for about 20 goals this season, right? See, and then I'm looking at the board and I'm like, Petrie's over 30. Yep, 35 years of age. 28 games, 3 goals, 9 assists, 12 points. Currently out with injury. So again, it is a core with a lot of experience. It's a core that may very well be able to go for another run, but the streakiness this year, I guess it's going to depend on which streak they're on going into the playoffs. But yeah, Petrie's been good, but again, he's been hurt for a lot of games. Joseph, 39 games, 2 goals, 10 assists, 12 points. I think P.O. Joseph has been playing very well lately. He has been one of those bright spots on this team, even when they're not playing well. Joseph, I think, has been good. Danton Heinen, 37 games, 3 goals, 8 assists, 11 points. He's a UFA this summer. Pedersen, 41 games, 11 assists. Dumoulin, 43 games, 9 assists. He's 31 years of age. He's a UFA this summer as well. I can't see Dumoulin being anywhere but Pittsburgh. That being said, they showed last summer they're willing to change out their defense. Right now they're allowing goals at a rate that's around average for the league. Do they end up moving on from Dumoulin? Do they keep him? For how long? And what does that contract look like? All that fun stuff. And then there's the goaltending, and I think there's something to be discussed with the goaltending. So first you got Jari, who's currently hurt. 15, 5, and 4, 918 save percentage, and he's an unrestricted free agent this summer. Quality starts. So quality starts are listed as starts where the goaltender gets a save percentage above 900, right? Above 90% of the shots they save. Jari, 64%. That's a good number. DeSmith, 6'9 and 2, 906 save percentage. He's 31 years of age. Jari's 27. If somebody's under the age of or 30 or under, I didn't put their age up because I thought it was important to point out how many players Pittsburgh has right now that are above the age of 30, and you have to think about the future, right? So for DeSmith, his quality starts 52.9%. At one point this season, Jari and DeSmith's numbers were virtually identical. Now we've seen a clear separation. DeSmith's clearly the backup of the two. Jari's the starter. And this really gives Jari a lot to work with when it comes to working out a new extension with the Pittsburgh Penguins, which I figure happens anyways. Then there's Tokarski, 33 years of age, 1-1 record, 915 save percentage. He's an unrestricted free agent this summer. He's your number 3 goaltender. No quality starts with a save percentage above 90%, but again, he's the number 3. So Tokarski's managed to come in and win one of the 2 decisions he's had. I think that's perfectly fine. So when we look at what they're trying to do, they're trying to avoid the pattern they've had, right? So they win the Cup in 2016 and 2017. 2018, they lost a hard-fought series against the Caps in 6 in the second round. And that series was that was one of my favorite series to watch. At least in the history of this channel, I would say that's one of my favorite series to watch. 2019 in the first round, and I know people are going to say, well, because Pittsburgh lost. No, that series was just a very well-played series. Most series between Washington and Pittsburgh are very, very good. That's why I'm always rooting for another matchup, because even though Pittsburgh wins most of them, they're still very fun to watch. 2019, they lost in the first round against the Islanders in 4 straight. That was a shocker. Absolute shocker. And so the expectation going to the 2020 playoffs was that revenge should be on their mind. They had the Montreal Canadiens up against them. They lost in 4 in the qualifying round against Montreal, 3-1. And it was the Carey Price deal. You know, this is why they didn't want to make it a best of 3 for the qualifying round, because teams didn't want Carey Price to be able to steal 2 out of 3 games and win the series. 2021, they lost in the first round. It was the Islanders again, this time in 6 games. So they won a couple against the Islanders. And again, I thought, well, they're going to beat the Islanders. They're going to get their... That's the funny thing is, in all 3 cases against the Islanders the first time, Montreal the second time, and the Islanders the third time, and last year against the New York Rangers, I finally stopped taking the Penguins because they had lost in the first round 3 times in a row. Qualifying is the first round in this instance. And they lost in the first round in 7 against the Rangers. Now, people will point out the Penguins weren't entirely healthy. They didn't have their number 1 goaltender. They didn't have their number 2 at points in that series. Did that play a role in it? Yes. But in the end, what people care about when they look back historically is, but who won and who lost? Because there are plenty of teams that, as far back as I can remember watching hockey, we can look back on a series and say, oh man, there was that injury, and if it wasn't for that injury, they probably would have won that series. Or, you know, that goal goes in off that defenseman, or that goal goes in, and normally a goaltender would save that one, and that just changed the whole series. In the end, the Rangers win that series. Pittsburgh is looking at being eliminated in the first playoff round they've played 4 years in a row. They're trying to avoid 5. The problem is with the track that they're taking right now, they could be on a collision course with either the Boston Bruins or the Carolina Hurricanes if they ended up being a wild card. And I don't like their chances against either team. Regular season, they've lost in the 6 games they've played against Boston and Carolina. They've been close, but they've lost all those games. And so I don't like their odds there. The one thing I've wondered with Pittsburgh is, at what point in time do you make some kind of a shift in how things are being done and make a really bold move? The changes on the blue line last year were interesting ideas, like in the offseason, but like a really bold decision to, we're going to get younger, or we're going to try to make sure we have that sustained success. And I get it. You have Sidney Crosby, one of the best players in the history of the game, and you want to make sure that the team's competitive. You want to make sure that Sid's happy, and the fans expect that excellence as well. This is a team that has spoiled its fan base for many, many years. You don't have to worry about playoffs. I've been having the argument about whether or not the playoffs are an accomplishment. I think making the playoffs is an accomplishment. I think being one of the top 16 teams in a 30-team league, now a 32-team league, I think that's an accomplishment. And it's one that Pittsburgh, they seem to be able to do it in their sleep. I expect them to make the playoffs. But once they're in the playoffs, I don't see them beating Boston. I don't see them beating Carolina. If they got into, say, a third place showing against... that could be against New Jersey. That could be against the Rangers. That could be against Washington. I don't know if I like their odds of beating those teams. Although Washington, I think there could be a vulnerability there. Washington-Pittsburgh would be an interesting first-round matchup because Washington has an aging roster as well. They have that superstar that's been compared to Crosby many times over. And while there would be eye-rolling of, oh, not this series again, I'd be chomping at the bit to see it again because we haven't seen it since 2018. It's been 5 years since we saw it. So I don't know what to make of Pittsburgh right now, because as good as they've looked when they've been winning, they've looked just as bad when they've been losing. And when they're losing, they look slow. It's not the same. And whether injuries have played a role or not, the one thing to keep in mind is Malkin and Crosby haven't missed a game this year. These are players that usually will miss some games with injury, especially with the way Malkin plays. Malkin plays, a very there's some risk to his game, let's say, that's caused him to end up getting hurt. It's the way that he plays the game. So if Malkin got hurt right now, what would that do to Pittsburgh's season? If Crosby got hurt, what would that do to Pittsburgh's season? Keeping in mind, when Crosby's gotten hurt in the past, the record's technically gotten better a lot of the time because Mike Sullivan manages to make the right adjustments. But what would happen? So the question that I have with all of this on the board is a simple one. Pittsburgh, are they a contender? They right now has just got this middling record, and they're gonna blast through, and they're gonna be fine. Is this a team that's just right on the cusp, and they might make it, they might not, they might be out in the first round again, and then they'll just rinse and repeat for next year? Or are they on the verge of taking that drop? Every team does. Everything's cyclical with the National Hockey League. Eventually, a team will drop off. They'll end up below the playoff line, and they have to do a retool or a rebuild. What are the Pittsburgh Penguins right now? So I'll leave you with that existential question. Let me know your thoughts on that in the comment section below as always. Or do you expect them to have a really good second half and end up with one of the top spots? Or do you think they're going to keep having these winning streaks, losing streaks, and just end up in a wild card spot or maybe below? Let me know your thoughts. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.